We're saved. We're gonna be so good now, everybody. We fixed it with the Save America Act. Let's talk about that for a little bit. The Save America Act has passed the House. What is it? What does it do? Why is it called Save America? And does it save America? We're gonna answer all that. I'll answer that last one first. No. The Save America Act positions itself as an election security bill, with SAVE standing for Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. Of note, safeguarding voter eligibility is not what this bill does. The bill is also literally tacked on to a completely unrelated bill about selecting members of the board of the VA, but that's just how Congress works. What this bill does, as written, is that any time that anyone needs to go register to vote, they must physically present proof of their U.S. citizenship to a government official. When I say proof of citizenship, I mean strict requirements that prove that you were born as a U.S. citizen or on U.S. soil. That doesn't include driver's licenses or most existing government IDs, including real IDs. Real IDs will count, but only if they specifically list you as a citizen, which they don't all do that. Here's a list of stuff that you could use under the SAVE Act to prove you're a citizen in order to be able to register to vote. Not to vote, but to even register. A currently valid US passport, a military ID along with a service record indicating that you were born in the US, a government-issued photo ID which explicitly lists your place of birth as the US, which is not a common type of government ID, and a real ID if it actually lists that you are explicitly a citizen, a birth certificate that shows that you were born in the US, as well as a handful of other tertiary IDs that most people will not have. So again, to register to vote, you would have to physically get one of those pieces of documentation and present it. If you could not get your hands on that documentation, you're just fucked. You just don't get to register to vote. So this is not a voter ID law. It's not a proposal to send voter IDs to existing American citizens. It's not that kind of law. It just adds administrative burden to registering to vote. There are already 36 states that do require some kind of photo ID in order to vote. This eclipses all of those laws and is way stricter. Those laws would allow something like a driver's license, which you've gotten from the government. The bill also doesn't have any plans for grandfathering in existing registered voters. If you ever need to update your voter registration under this bill, you would have to again get these documents and bring them somewhere. 9.1% of the population does not have access to any of these documents. 60% of the country doesn't have a passport, which is probably the easiest way to get a document that proves your citizenship. And that's not to say that getting a passport's easy. That's the problem. Getting these documents can also cost money, making this essentially a poll tax, which is just not allowed. If you can't physically get to an office to show this documentation, if you don't have access or you can't physically get to the documentation, you're just fucked again. And then, of course, shenanigans with changing your name. If you got married and you changed your last name and it no longer matches your birth certificate, that could cause a problem. And then not to mention that this administration's been cracking down on stuff like transgender people getting passports by refusing to let them have an X on their passport as a gender and forcing them to choose M or F or forcing them to use a specific name. Essentially, they're saying if you want to register to vote, you need to have an obscure document, and we're going to make it harder to get those obscure documents. And at any time, they could make it even harder to get those obscure documents or remove some of the documents and have just, you got to go get your proof of astral projection into your parents' balls before you turn into a baby document. At time of recording, there are 50 Republicans in the Senate who are signed on to this bill. Again, it has passed the House. It has not passed the Senate. But with 50 Senate Republicans on board with this measure, it's probably still not going to pass. As it stands, if it were to go to a simple majority vote in the Senate, then they would have a 50-50 tie. J.D. Vance would come in and break the tie. That's how that works. However, the filibuster makes it so that there is a 60-vote threshold that most bills have to reach in order to actually get passed. While 50 Republicans are on board with this bill, they are not on board with getting rid of the filibuster. They can instead do that classic little ditty that American politicians love to do. The Republicans pass a bill in the House and make a bunch of noise about it and make a bunch of red meat for their base. They toss it over to the Senate where it stops and doesn't get passed. It doesn't get passed because they would need to have it past the 60 vote threshold. Republicans don't have 60 Republicans in the Senate, so they blame the Democrats for not voting for the act that's going to save America. The Democrats didn't vote for the election security bill. They must want insecure elections, guys. And like, the Democrats do this to Republicans all the time too. It's not like this is unique to the Republicans. It's just Republicans currently have a trifecta and are just doing as much evil shit as they can. Regardless, non-citizen voting remains a non-issue. For example, over the past year, Utah has been conducting a complete review of their voter registration and found one registered non-citizen out of 2 million. They also found 0 instances of non-citizens voting. Meanwhile, over in Kansas, when they passed a stricter voter registration law, they saw a 12% drop in registrations from eligible citizens. Tens of thousands of people who just could no longer vote, even though they meet the requirements, but they couldn't get a specific piece of paper. So it passed the House, it's in the Senate, it doesn't look like it's gonna pass the Senate, but that doesn't mean there's a 0% chance. So what I would recommend is, if you live in the US, if you wanna be able to vote, make sure that you're currently registered, and if you have an upcoming move or whatever, maybe figure out what the local laws there are for registering. Make sure any family and friends are registered as well, and also help spread the word that this is not a voter ID law. That they keep saying it's a voter ID law. That's not what this is. If it was a voter ID law, you would get a free issued ID managed by the government that they just give you as a citizen. And in the case where they couldn't give it to you, they would have ample ways for you to be able to go and get one. You should be able to go to the fucking library and get one, just like you can get a library card. The argument of using an ID for voting makes sense. I get it. It's super easy to be on board with, like, yeah, of course people should have to show an ID to vote. Most people already do. And in the cases where they don't, it's because they've been already verified by a different system. It's just a non-issue. But when has something being a non-issue ever stopped us from passing laws that make everyone's life harder? It's neat. I hope this cleared some stuff up. Go be good. Bye.